Ellie Warren here. What if vampires didn't hide in coffins, but instead ran corporations? What if an immortal held a grudge and then engineered a disease to exact his revenge? That's where my latest book, The Night Shift, starts. If you'd like to hear a preview of the first scene, indulge me for a few minutes and stick around. Breaking news. One day can make all the difference. Hell, 1 minute to the next, even. For instance, what you thought you knew before lunch versus what you knew to be true before dinner. President Samuel Colton sat quietly in the Oval Office behind the resolute desk and pondered what he'd learned in his last meeting as he leafed through briefing materials and recommendations. It wasn't what he expected by any stretch. Afterward, he asked his secretary Celia to cancel the last 2 meetings of his day unless it was an emergency. He needed time to think, to assimilate the new information. The director of the CDC, Dr. Martin Johansson, scheduled an emergency meeting with him and said he would have 2 guests attending that could shed light on an epidemic that threatened life and the status quo. He was thinking of measles, legionnaires, tuberculosis. Some knowledge seems as if it's set in stone. This is this way, that is that way, and that's all there is to it. Today, apparently, all bets were off. As president, he'd seen and learned many things from many people from a plethora of different walks of life. His political career was expansive. However, what he learned today was something he never would have believed had he not seen proof, and he couldn't help but wish it wasn't happening on his watch. Marty Johansson was shown in, along with 2 men. One a New York lawyer and real estate mogul, the other worked in D.C. within the Beltway as one of the regional heads of Varencourt International. Varencourt was a global conglomerate that owned everything from hotels, pharmaceutical and chemical companies, banks, to a shipping company. Wagner was on the board of directors of multiple corporations, mostly as a silent member. He knew the names of both men, but as both kept low profiles, he knew little about them other than their names and reputations. What they might bring to a conversation on a life-threatening epidemic that could upend the status quo was beyond him. The lawyer's name was Michel Robichaud, tall with black hair, dark eyes, imposing, well-heeled, well-groomed, with a bespoke suit that screamed wealth. The other was Timothy Wagner, who was as unlike Robichaud as he could be. Where Robichaud was tall and dark, Wagner was shorter, sturdy, compact, with sandy-colored hair. Like Robichaud, he was wearing a bespoke suit that screamed old money. Robichaud seemed approachable, Wagner not so much. The man reminded Colton of a coiled spring. After seeing him, he could understand why he was a mostly silent board member. Wagner was one of those people who he mentally termed a mismatch. Wagner smiled, made nice, looked nice, but something about him seemed disingenuous, distant. His sense about the man was that he was familiar with power, particularly its more unsavory aspects. Colton had seen varieties of it walk through his office before. He thought he knew about them. He was wrong in so many ways. Marty Johansson didn't seem himself, and Colton soon understood why once he began speaking. "Sir, what we need to tell you is fairly dire. This could have been an email, but without these 2 gentlemen being with me here in person, I fear, in fact, I'm certain, that you wouldn't believe it. Had I not had a similar show and tell, I wouldn't have believed it. For now, everything I'm about to tell you, sir, needs to be kept in channels and only shared with those who have an absolute overriding need to know." Colton nodded his head in assent. "I'm sure you've seen the TV news reports about the gruesome murders in the Northeast that are now occurring here in the D.C. metro area and near Baltimore." Colton's brow furrowed. "I have. I understand that New York and Connecticut state police both have task forces in place to deal with them, and the FBI's got their own, and have been involved since the murders crossed state lines. What does that have to do with the CDC or an epidemic?" Johansson twitched a little, and one of his hands was shaking. A lone bead of sweat dripped from his brow. He turned to the men with him. Colton would never forget. Never. The 2 men in his office both looked him directly in the eyes, and then revealed that they, in fact, both had fangs. For a minute, his brain paused, and he may have held his breath. Hell of a show and tell. The Night Shift is now available on Amazon.com in print, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited, as well as BarnesandNoble.com. Hope you enjoyed that preview, and thanks again for joining me. Bye!